Chegou aí? Sonzinho? De boa?
morning, gentlemen. I hope you can hear me. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think this is much better now. I trust you can all hear me. And we are so glad they're able to join us this morning for this session right here at the Water for Climate Pavilion on financing resilient landscapes, catalyzing partnerships for irrigation, land reclamation, climate resilience in Africa's arid and semi-arid regions, co-hosted by a number of institutions. We unfortunately didn't manage to have the Ministry of Water from Kenya. The entire State Department didn't manage to travel, but we are glad that we have many partners here to discuss this very critical and very important element, especially when we talk about food, climate, land. All these are very critical issues. Yeah, and I think to kick us off, I would like to invite Dr. Greenwell from the International Water Management as the experts on water to share a few reflections. And after that, I will have the pleasure also of inviting Professor Tilahun to share a few reflections on this theme. And then we'll have Dr. Bebe, then we'll have Simon, and then we'll have Sandy Joffrey. Then after that, we'll have a couple of questions and short debate and reflections on a number of issues around water and climate. A big round of applause as Greenwell comes.
Right, so is it good morning? Okay, so it's a good morning to everyone. My name is Greenwell Machaya. I work with the International Water Management Institute based in Pretoria as the deputy representative for the region. And I'm so glad that you have invited us to this meeting because although we are based in Pretoria, International Water Management Institute extends beyond Pretoria. In fact, our headquarters are in Colombo. We have offices in Ghana, in Egypt, in Ethiopia, now in Kenya, in Malawi, in Zambia, Zimbabwe, as well as in South Africa. I might have even forgotten another one. When it comes to the issues of agricultural water management in general, I mean, I think we cannot overemphasize the importance of agricultural water management, especially because also in Africa, as you know, there is a lot of this kind of negative effects of climate change. So either rains come at the wrong time or not in enough quantities, etc., etc. As a result, trying to get ways to survive such kind of erratic rainfall is extremely important. That's why even at this scope, water is at the center of everything we are talking about. But the reality is that if you look at Africa as a whole, or maybe especially if you take away the northern part of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, you find that the share of land that is allocated to irrigation is pretty small. In the Southern Africa in particular and Eastern Africa also, if you aggregate it, you find that it's less than 10%. And you start wondering as to why such is the case. Okay, in the first place, that's not really nice that a bigger share of land that is allocated to agriculture is rain-fed. Because once it is rain-fed, we know that it is kind of vulnerable to the effects of climate change. And that means also your yields are going to become vulnerable to the same. If you're feeding markets elsewhere, your international trade gets affected. So it's something that you need to change. But the question is, why is this the case? There are several reasons as to why you find that most of the land is not irrigated, even though we know that irrigation is one of the key strategies that one can follow in order to resolve this issue. In Zambia, say for example, Zambia as well as Kenya, Malawi, Mozambique, over the past few years, we had this El Nino effects whereby many districts did not have enough rainfall. As a result, everything in terms of crops production went down. The leaders were like, oh yeah, we need to irrigate a lot, etc., etc. But the thing is, that's not happening. Or it's happening, but at a slower scale. The question is why. I think a bigger reason is really to do with the availability of financing to do irrigation. Financing is a challenge because irrigation in some cases is resource intensive, plus also, of course, it requires some kind of skill. And so the issue here maybe that we should be discussing is how then do we make sure that we have such kind of finance how can farmers leverage on the existing finance mechanisms in order for them to adopt irrigation much? Because if we don't do anything much in that area, we'll find that the situation will still continue to be the same. So whether you're in Kenya or in Zambia, Malawi, Mozambique, elsewhere, still the share of irrigated land is going to still be smaller than 10%. What we are finding in some of the studies we're having is that it's always useful to invest in, to think about blended finance. You shouldn't just think in terms of asking the farmer that, okay, you need to procure equipment yourself. You know, the farmer doesn't have that. So, but where do you leverage? Government has to come in. The private sector has to come in. Philanthropy organizations also need to have to come in order in order to help. And if you do not do that, it's a problem. But for me, because I also work a lot with the government, I am always still challenging the government to say, just like they have these targets for the entire agricultural sector. So we have targets there under the Cadem Declaration where we're saying in order to make meaningful transformation within the agricultural sector, we have to invest at least 10% of public expenditure into the agricultural sector. If we do that, then maybe we can grow the agricultural sector by about 6%, which in terms of science, it is transformative. Can't we do the same for the irrigation sector? So I think we need to be trying to do the same. Out of the share of money that goes to the agricultural sector from the public coffers, can we also challenge governments to say allocate a certain percentage there? Because even if when you do studies, you see that that's one of the areas, subsectors of the agricultural sector that if you invest a lot, you are doing something better. For now, if you look at the expenditure patterns, agricultural expenditure reviews reports for many countries, you find that the share of money that goes to the agricultural sector, to the agricultural sector as development expenditure is very low compared to the recurrent expenditure. Why? Okay, it's not like recurrent expenditure is bad. We know we still need extension services, right? So that comes as recurrent expenditure. But at the same time, we need to be creating capital. So we have to be seeing the share that goes to capital formation to also be increasing over time. If we can be seeing the amount of money or share of money going to procurement of irrigation equipment, procurement of course construction equipment for irrigation, etc. I think that would be something that I would kind of encourage. But we should also be trying to encourage the private sector to get interested in this area. And in most cases, if you go to banks and say, okay, maybe you should help lend money to that farmer who is going to irrigate the crops. Yeah, the banks sometimes come back and say, okay, can you convince me that if I do that, I am not going to lose my money? So from our research perspective, I think one of the areas we think we should also be doing with partners, including governments, is to engage into that science that generates evidence that if you invest in a certain way, in a certain equipment, you're going to have rates of return on investments that will be high enough to justify you borrowing money from the banks. And then if we win in that argument, then we will have banks or other partners that will provide some capital to de-risk some of the investments within the agricultural sector. Now, having said that, I wanted also to just highlight some of the work, realizing that irrigation is important. I wanted to highlight some of the work that my colleagues under the under the guidance of Dr. Inga Jacobs Mata are doing in Kenya, because Kenya is not here. So I think it would be good for me to just read out some of the things that they gave me also. So currently, realizing the importance of water management, the IMI, which is supporting the Minister of Water and Sanitation and Irrigation through, they have concluded an MOU, and they're directly helping with the implementation of the NISIP, helping shape policies and governance reforms that make irrigation investments inclusive. Because I think part of the problems that we have are that in some cases you don't have a good and enabling environment for investment into the irrigation sector. So a key to that is reforming policies in order to make things happen. But also, data is at the helm of ensuring that you can incentivize investments into the irrigation sector. Why data? As I just alluded to, if I don't know that my investments into irrigation in Kenya are going to lead to returns, I'm not going to be interested as a farmer. You need to come with numbers, show me that there are markets, and that whatever I invest is going to come. So IWI is developing irrigation suitability maps, as well as some kind of some integrated data systems together with the Ministry of Agriculture there, in order to help guide investments, which I think if they completed some of this, they will work in as very handy for promoting irrigation investments, especially from the private sector perspective. But IMI is also working with the Ministry of Water and Sanitation and the World Bank in helping design blended finance mechanisms, leveraging on climate funds, carbon markets, and public-private partnerships to accelerate irrigation investments under the NISIP. Now, that work might be in infancy, but at least my colleagues are also advancing there and within the International Water Management Institute. Blended finance, like I alluded to, is important. You can't rely on just one source of finance, because nobody has enough funding for this. Also, there is kind of an attempt to promote solar and climate smart irrigation technologies within there. So through their solar phase 2 program with SDC funding and Strathmore University and private actors, IMI is scaling solar solutions across the agricultural sector within Kenya, which I think if it's successful, it might go a long way in solving some of the challenges that deter the popularization of and adoption of irrigation technologies. They're also trying to invest in capacity development, because, as we said, it's easy to see irrigation as something that is not kind of skill intensive, but I can assure you, through the surveys that we do and the work that we do across the continent, it's so easy to notice that some things you take for granted are not actually so trivial for farmers. You find that there's a borehole there that a farmer is using to irrigate. Some small little thing or a nut or bolt gets broken, and then that's the end of the irrigation. Yet with some kind of targeted training and capacity development, you would easily win, and you would have them maintain their own equipment. So IMI is also trying to, through the Emerging Africa Rise Initiative with the World Bank, IMI is helping to develop capacity within those areas in order to ensure that issues of capacity, issues of finance, issues of data, issues of knowledge, etc., are resolved in order to encourage people in Kenya, smallholder farmers in Kenya, to embark in irrigation. So I think I can stop there for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Greenwell, for that very, very profound thoughts on the subject. Yeah, I don't want to water down anything you said. Everything you said is extremely important. So I just want to quickly, right about now, to invite Professor Tilahun to also share his reflections.
So, good morning, colleagues. Tilahun Ahmed is my name. I'm the director of a program called Sustainable Farming in Agra, where water and landscapes are also part of the component. Dr. Greenwell has emphasized the irrigation and the water component of it. So I will try to avoid the water sector and talk about the landscape component of it and how it's related to water sector. As we know, we talk about land degradation at a scale at the continental level. And there's even a UN convention to combat desertification, which is really attempting to bring in land neutrality by 2030. And landscapes, water, soil are part of the bigger ecosystem. And those ecosystems are expected to have products. And the product is food, is water, is ecosystem services. And we talk about really multifunctional landscapes, which are managed holistically to support both productivity but also ecosystems. And that, of course, comes into healthy diets, water access, biodiversity, and all of that. And managing those landscapes really reduces the pressure of agriculture on these natural resources. So really, where is the balance? And how do we ensure that productivity, nutrition, climate, all are achieved, with the same intention? So managing landscapes, and managing land is about managing water. You cannot separate the two. If you manage your landscape well, it's about improving your soil, which means improving the water holding capacity of your soil, reducing erosion, increasing infiltration, and having higher and more diversified water systems downstream. And the challenge we face is that, the private sector is not interested in these long-term investments because they don't bring any immediate benefits. So how do we encourage the public sector to invest on those basic infrastructures that would have cascading effects on productivity, on irrigation, on job creation, and resilience? From experience in Agra we rarely also, even the governments, invest on land management unless it is linked to development. So there should be a development outcome, which means, one is irrigation. When I was working in the CGIR system, we were together. I was, as part of IMI, I was managing the East African Nile Basin research program for the whole CG. And that time we were talking about, linking landscape with irrigation. So whatever investment comes, be it from African Development Bank or IFAD or World Bank, we're injecting, for 1 hectare of irrigable land, about 4 hectares of landscape management. So because we know that unless the watersheds are protected, that the sustainability of the irrigation scheme is very, very low. So to do that, if you have to invest on 1 hectare of land in downstream irrigation, you have to manage 4 hectares of land upstream in the watersheds, which are the water sources, the water towers of this system, which is about really, landscape financing, yeah? At the end of the day, it's about landscape financing. The other initiative we were talking about, is, our governments are investing hugely on hydropower, yeah? Most of irrigated landscapes are also linked to hydropower. For example, in Ethiopia, in my country, almost 100% of the energy source is hydropower. But again, the government is investing millions and millions of dollars to desilt, the dams, because they are being silted on yearly basis. So instead of desilting and removing the silt and investing so much money, why don't you invest your money, help communities upstream, to protect the landscapes, to afforest it, to put conservation measures, so that the silt is not coming downstream to destroy the whole investment, which is cheaper short-term, cheaper, and long-term sustainable. Yeah? So that's the type of also investment we used to advocate for managing both water and landscapes. The third thing we talk about is really community-based watershed management. How do you mobilize communities? Bringing, those communities together to manage not only their farms, but also their landscapes. Because the landscape management is about more water downstream, is about minimizing erosion, is about creating ecosystem services. So all these upstream, downstream relationships, reducing tension, reducing conflict because of water, because you will have yielded more water. I remember when after IMI, I moved to Ikesat that time. And I was working on a landscape, about 10,000 hectares of land. In 6 years' time, by managing the upstream landscapes, putting conservation, regreening, in 6 years' time, we were able to increase the downstream irrigation from 240 hectares to 970 hectares because of the recharge. Yeah? And they were irrigating whole year. So for me, what really I learned from that small watershed is that unless you manage your watersheds, your irrigation scheme downstream is at a risk. So there's a very strong relationship between upstream and downstream in small basins, but and also in the bigger basins. Take our bigger Nile River. Unless the water sources, the water towers are managed well, in Rwanda, in Ethiopia, in Uganda, in Kenya, downstream flow will be for sure reduced, and with climate change even worse. So how do we make sure that this cross-border relationship is also managed to improve landscape management, at the same time, develop schemes that are resilient and functional? I think the other thing I want to talk about is linking landscapes and irrigation with major value chains. Water is just an input. Unless people are getting the return per investment, they will not manage it. And that, of course, has to be associated with a profitable input, value chain. It has to be accompanied by a good agronomy. That's really where we always are challenged in East Africa, even West Africa. The extension system is geared towards, rain-fed agriculture. A rain-fed extension cannot manage, an irrigation scheme, because there's a lot of social movement, within that scheme, be it organizing water user associations, be it managing water resources, the whole engineering component of it. So there should be a very strong relationship between socio-economic and agronomic principles. And that's where really irrigation makes also a challenge. So another really value addition to watersheds to really be managed well is really, key value chains like apiculture, for example, which are adding value to the people's income. At the same time, will sustain the landscape. And in Ghana, in the whole of West Africa, in Cote d'Ivoire, we see cocoa farms very strongly, well managed, because there is input, income, and there is return per investment. So my last word is that this type of landscape water relationship is multi-institutional and multidisciplinary, and has to be linked to income of farmers. It has to be linked to benefits, but also we should be in a position to demonstrate the multiple benefits of these initiatives to the public sector, to the public investment, so that they are keen about investing on it, and also assure them that there will be a return per investment. I can't stop here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Tilahun, for those very powerful and important words. You finished from a point where when the minister was handing over this session to me, they told me that one thing I should emphasize over and over again is the need for partnerships. Yeah, you know, in a couple of years back, Agra, just before I joined Agra had supported the Ministry of Agriculture then, because irrigation then was a state department in the Ministry of Agriculture to develop the national irrigation strategy. And later on, the irrigation department moved from the Ministry of Agriculture to the Ministry of Water, but they made progress also now to develop the National Irrigation Sector Investment Plan, which Dr. Greenwell did highlight quite a lot earlier, and their support IWIM is giving the government of Kenya to develop that particular initiative. But one thing that they kept on saying, the ministry kept on saying, is that when we have many partners who come, many of them run away from water because they think this is really heavy investment. But one thing they kept on emphasizing is that with very many partners, with a small contribution we give, it'd be very useful in being able to advance issues around water. It's now my pleasure to invite Simon, CEO for SNV, to also, we've done a lot of work in the region around, particularly in the arid and semi-arid areas. Please share with us some of your reflections.
Great, thank you, Jeremiah. Great to be here. I guess I'll stand up here as well, shall I? And thank you, Jeremiah, for emphasizing the importance of partnerships. So it's grateful to be here with friends from SIWI. We greatly appreciate the collaboration. AGRA, of course, a deepening collaboration, and then wonderful former SMV colleagues that I get to meet. So it's a pleasure to be here. And Tilhun, you really kind of struck me with what I heard you saying around the importance of, I know you were saying landscapes, and I think you were also really emphasizing the connections and the linkages, and the need and the opportunity for integration across different approaches. So I'm going to build on that, but I was just looking at the screen, and frankly, Greenwell, I hope you don't mind me saying, your name sort of exemplifies some of what we're talking about. The green and the well, the solar irrigation is a classic example of those linkages. So I was sitting here listening attentively and reflecting on that. So I'm going to be fairly brief, but I'm also grateful to be here. I came over from Kenya, had a wonderful meeting with AGRA's new fantastic president, Alice, early last week, and then I was out in Machakos seeing some of our work, really looking at those linkages between regenerative agriculture and productive use of renewable energy. And at SMV, we're so grateful we've gone into a first 5-year phase of a 10-year collaboration with the IKEA Foundation on something called Power for Food, which is 4 countries in East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and Ethiopia. And it really gets to the heart of exploring how we can deepen partnerships and collaborations, how we can better leverage those nexus points to contribute to greater outcomes, and how we can catalyze a wider movement. So briefly, what I saw, and we're working in 6 counties in Kenya. I was out in Machakos, but what I saw is a kind of glimmer into how we're enabling 5,500 smallholder farmers to adopt more regenerative practices. And we're not going to be, as SMV, overly dogmatic around this. We're talking about a journey. We're talking about more circularity and more regenerative practices. And through that work, over the last few years, we've enabled a generation of over $5 million for those smallholder farmers that we're working with. We've helped to catalyze, or we've contributed to the creation of 66,000 formal or informal jobs. And let's remember, agri-food systems, particularly in Africa, particularly for smallholder farmers, that's job creation. Yeah, those are jobs. And then a 30% increase in productivity through these regenerative practices. We're not talking yields, we're talking outputs versus inputs, and the increases in productivity. And I saw and I met, frankly, some extraordinarily wonderful SMV team members, for sure, but some extraordinarily knowledgeable smallholder farmers. 2 wonderful lady called Victoria and a gentleman called Urbanus, and the depth of knowledge around different horticultural produce and techniques, the depth of knowledge around biodigesters, the capturing of biogas and the clean cooking potential of that, the depth of knowledge around how you use your bio slurry instead of your synthetic fertilizer inputs. Frankly, there was even one innovation I didn't know about, Azola, this kind of duckweed-like thing on ponds. It just goes on creating itself, and that's being used regeneratively as chicken feed. And I know these can sound like small examples, but when you put it all together, frankly, you have an opportunity to really catalyze a movement. So our Power for Food partnership is precisely that, and it's focused on 3 L's: link, learn, and leverage. And so the linking part, what we're starting to see is when you've got that bundling of solar irrigation technologies or capturing of biogas through biodigesters, or some of your more innovative approaches to multi-cropping or intercropping, you have a fabulous opportunity to catalyze linkages across a wider segment of a community, including the private sector, which is how you start to get to the scaling of the ladder. So the linking is really, really important here. Locally led linkages and reinforcing those. Secondly, the learning, and we are hugely committed now to going beyond those 5,500 smallholder farmers that I just referred to. We're working with many, many others in other countries, but seeing how we can generate greater learnings that can feed into the policy frameworks within governments such as Kenya. So I know the minister was sadly unable to be here, but I do hope online with our good friends at AGRA that we can disseminate this and explore together how through further learning of the adoption of regenerative practices, not just at a smallholder farmer level, but at those kind of mid-sized farms that may be a little bit wary of going too deep or too quickly towards the more regenerative. If we get a greater sample size of learning, then we will go some way to catalyzing a wider adoption and a wider movement. So I really hope that the government of Kenya and other governments that we work with can think about what policies or what incentives can be created for those next level sized farmers, not skill set, but sized farmers, to adopt more regenerative practices. And then the third one, and by the way, we have a Reuters piece that a wonderful colleague of mine from SMV and a colleague from the IKEA Foundation put out a couple of weeks ago, and maybe you'll be kind enough to share this in the links in the video. On the leveraging side, what's so abundantly clear is we need the access to finance. And some of you may know at SMV we're working on very, very large scale funds like the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development with FMO, seed funded by the Dutch government, catalyzed further with the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus. But those ticket sizes of 10 to 15 million euro, they're not going to work for smallholder farmers like Urbanus or Victoria. So we need to think about how we can aggregate those smallholder farmers together to enable smaller ticket sizes, but not so small on a smallholder farmer by smallholder farmer level, how they can be aggregated to enable greater access to better forms of finance. And particularly important for a smallholder farmer is predictability of financing. Predictability, yeah? So ensuring that you can plan ahead for the financing that you know you're going to need. And then my last point, and it's also related to the leveraging side, is in Kenya, for example, like in many other countries, there are still quite large subsidies. I believe it's 30% in Kenya for synthetic fertilizer imports. We would love to see some incentivizing or subsidizing or policy frameworks, which we're contributing to as SME, to enable more regenerative practices. And if you go back to what I just said around 30% increase in productivity, we've got the metrics. If we can generate more metrics at that next kind of farm size up level, and if we can find through policies ways to further enable those smallholder farmers to go further and those mid-level size farmers to go further away from synthetics, yeah, to more regenerative practices, and enabling the linkages of your solar irrigation, your solar drying, your solar cooling, your biodigesters, your bioslurry, etc., with the linkages to market, with the certification, right, the certification that is so important, then I think you're really going to get further in catalyzing a movement which is certainly market-driven, but also led by governments and policy frameworks. So I hope others here will join us through the Power of Food Partnership to go further in trying to catalyze that movement. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Simon, for that very passionate statement and words. It's now my pleasure to invite Dr. Abebe. Water is also a climate-related matter, to share his reflections on this.
Thank you, Jeremiah, first to invite ICPAC to be one of the panelists here in this side event. My name is Abebe. I work for IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center, which is based in Nairobi. IGAD stands for Intergovernmental Authority on Development. That is one of the African Union economic blocs in Eastern Africa, constituted by 8 member countries. So ICPAC is the climate center for IGAD, and it is one of the leading climate services provider in the region. So my contribution to this side event will be from the climate angle. I have been engaged in climate change issues for several years as an advisor to the government of Ethiopia and also now in IGAD. And irrigation is identified as a key adaptation solution, be it for climate variability, be it for long-term climate change. And I fully agree, and the previous speakers also alluded to that. But the challenge is to do irrigation, you have to know your resource, your water resource. And your water resource, be it river, be it in ponds, be it in the soil, be it in groundwater, is factored or influenced by climate. The climate very much influences the availability of water. So unless we make use of climate information when it comes to water resource management, including irrigation, we will not go further. So for ICPAC, like I said, we are the leading climate information provider for the region, and we provide forecasts at various levels, weather and climate forecasts at weekly level, 10 days level, monthly, seasonal level, and also the long term. In the 50 years, 100 years, how the climate will behave and what the implication of that climate for the water resources. So that information is really critical for decision makers in irrigation, decision makers in water management, and decision makers in energy management as well. So this wide consensus taking irrigation as a solution, as an adaptation solution for food security is well recognized. The progress made so far, for me, is not satisfactory, especially when it comes to a region like IGAD, Eastern Africa, where 80 or 70% of the land is arid and semi-arid. Using water is critical. There is no option other than using water to escape to secure our food security, water security, energy security, and what have you. So, but in terms of, so what are the barriers for this not using, though it's widely accepted as a solution, as a technology to go for the future? What are the barriers really hindering us to widely adopt that technology? There could be several, like climate finance, the technology, the energy access. To use irrigation, you need to have access to energy. Where is that energy? Is it solar? Is it something else? And also, the use of climate information in decision making. Though the science has advanced a lot in terms of forecasting the coming weeks, the coming months, the coming season climate, when it comes to application in decision making for the water sector, for irrigation, is very much limited as so far. So we need to collaborate, we need to work together to address those challenges so that irrigation is used widely so that we become food secure in the future. Thank you very much for that, and that's my contribution.
Yeah, thank you very much. A big round of applause to Dr. Abebe. I know, I think it's almost 4 years ago, I had an ambitious undertaking to do agriculture in a very large scale of land, and irrigation was one of the things that was really top of my head. But I think I didn't manage my water well at that time, so leading me to quitting farming for a number of years. But 2 years ago, I decided to go back into farming, and I remember I decided to depend on rainfall, and anytime I had a challenge in the farm workers would always tell me, we are facing a struggle, we have a challenge with water. And we tried all manners of getting water to the farm, and one thing that I really remember is one time we had pipes from all over, and it's in an arid and semi-arid area where there's a lot of pastoralists. And what those guys used to do is they will walk around with their, I don't know the English term for it, but we call it cooking Swahili. They dig it, feed it to their livestock, and they don't even care to reconnect it back to enable me to move forward. To finalize this session for us this morning is Geoffrey. You've listened to a lot that has been said here. Where do we move from here? What are his reflections on this?
Thank you so much. So my name is Sunday Geoffrey. I'm the executive coordinator of Support to Mighty Cameroon. We're a grassroots organization based in Cameroon, and we work directly with local communities, and some of the work we do is restoring watersheds and restoring ecosystems. So when Prof was making his intervention, he was like speaking directly to me. When I was coming here, I organized a series of community dialogues with the different water user groups, smallholder farmers, pastoralists, fisher folks, to understand how water scarcity is impacting their activities. And when I was invited to speak at this event, I had a reflection of what one farmer told me. In the middle of August in Cameroon, normally in August is the peak of the rainy season. But for the last 5 years, they've been witnessing some sort of dry spell in August. And so this farmer has cultivated onions, and when we visited his farm, the onions were all withered because there was no rain. And one of the things he told us was, if someone can help to irrigate water to our farms, we won't be facing this. We'll be able to be sure of regular productivity. First, in Cameroon, millions of people in grassroots communities are smallholder farmers, and they depend on rain-fed agriculture. So when water sources run dry, and when rain patterns changes, what happens to these smallholder farmers? They find it very difficult to adapt without irrigation. But the challenge we are witnessing on the ground is that water sources, watersheds are running dry. So to be able to irrigate, you must have water. When water sources run dry, it means that even with Even with technology or even with the resources, farmers will still find it difficult to be able to irrigate water. And that is why we believe that it's important to invest in nature-based solutions like restoring catchment areas, like restoring watershed, to first be sure that we can have available water supply for smallholder uses. So one thing we have also realized on the field is that technology exists. In East Africa, I think rain harvesting technology exists and is very practicable. But this is new to Cameroon. So I see that collaboration will be very important. Cross-regional collaboration, cross-country collaboration will be very important for smallholder farmers to start doing irrigation and to be able to start adapting to water scarcity, adapting to changes in rainfall patterns. But also, I've also realized that solar energy irrigation is very cost-effective and very easy to manage by smallholder farmers. I happen to have a nursery that is managed by, that is powered by solar energy. When we came up with this initiative, is because it was very difficult for us, especially in the dry season, to access water. So we did solar irrigation, and now we are able to effectively manage our nurseries. And I think this is a technology that is very cost effective and that can be easily accessed by smallholder farmers. But there are issues of capacity gaps. So I feel that building capacities of smallholder farmers in this area is very important, and making sure that we intentionally invest in these technologies can help farmers to irrigate water to their farms and to ensure that they continuously engage in crop production. So to end it, irrigation to me is part of our campaign to say we have to move from, at COP30 we have to focus more on the implementation. So generally when we talk about adaptation, we are talking about implementation. So the discussion today about irrigation should be about implementation. So from here, I want to land on your question. So from here, going forward, we have to ensure that we have that we are investing in solutions like rain harvesting solutions. We are investing in solar-powered irrigation, but then we are also ensuring that we have governance, inclusive governance at local, regional, even at the continental level, to be sure that the existing water is managed effectively. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Geoffrey, for that very passionate speech. I don't know if anyone has any question to any of the panelists this morning. Yeah, so I'm going to invite the panelists for just a quick photo, and then we'll have that question, and then we'll close from there. Yeah, the question is for Simon. Yeah, so you can respond to the question, then have a picture, then we'll finalize it.
Sorry, I will not take much time. So, so my name is Chitransh. I'm from India, and I was in Sweden for some time, and I saw that there was universities like Swedish University of Agricultural Science who are working on the urine dehydration technology to remove, to replace synthetic fertilizers and use the biofertilizers instead of the synthetic ones. But there are challenges which they are facing, like heavy metal presence and pharmaceuticals, antibiotics that people take, so it comes out of urine and all, and that also remain in the dried form of fertilizers. So how is your organization, are they also working on the same similar projects, and if yes, then how are they seeing challenges in this kind of research areas? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I apologize, I have to get to another panel, so I'll be very, very succinct. It's a great question. I refer back to last week in Machakos. I saw exactly that. I saw very, very locally produced organic pesticides and use of local materials. I saw quite a high degree of experimentation. I also saw, frankly, a willingness to accept some losses, whether it's certain insects or certain birds coming in, as part of trying to change the wider system. What really stuck with me was this lady I mentioned, Victoria, who's trying to get her neighbors and her neighbors' neighbors and her neighbors' neighbors' neighbors to adopt the same practices. Because I think where you're going with your question is, if you just have your, in that case, half-hectare plot, which is really working on regenerative practices, but you're surrounded by other farmers who haven't adopted it, then you're never going to get to that level. So it's precisely why we need government policy frameworks, and we need the financial instruments that enable that experimentation, because as you experiment, some things will work and some things will be less successful. So you need the space and the financial instruments to enable that. I'm sorry I'm so brief, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll invite the panelists for just a quick photo, and then our session will have come to an end. And many thanks for all the participants for joining us for this session, and very great appreciation also to the panelists for their very insightful words. I know many others also are joining us online. We are also very grateful that you were able to join us for this session. Thank you very much, and have a good day ahead.